This week on the PRESSURECAST, Destiny 2 shows off gameplay, Phantom Dust gets a surprise release, and Zelda is coming to your smartphone. It's Monday, May 22nd, 2017. Everything happening in the world of video games is here, now on the PRESSURECAST. Hey, Pressure Pals, welcome to the 182nd episode of the PRESSURECAST. VideoGamesAreDumb.com's weekly news panic that posts every single Monday on iTunes, on Stitcher, on YouTube, and on TuneIn Radio. And of course, America's longest running independent newspaper at ShepherdExpress.com. My name is Colin Tanner, and I'm caffeinated and ready to ramble to you about some goddamn video games. But in case you never listened to the PRESSURECAST before, in case you've never listened to the PRESSURECAST before, 182 episodes, and you just stroll right up going, oh, what's this? What's this? Rubbernecking all around. Is this a podcast about video games? Well, I suppose I should be a good guest. No, you should be a good guest. I should be a good host. I'm already off to a bad start of being a good host by calling myself the guest. The point is that, okay, welcome to the show. And in case you don't know, each week the PRESSURECAST slices up the latest video game news, past, present, and future, and puts them into several sensational segments and jams it right in your ears in 2 hours or less. And if you want to contact the PRESSURECAST, let's say you have a question, comment, or concern. You're like, hey, I want this jerk that I'm watching or listening to read my question on air. It's easy. You can email pressurecast@gmail.com. You can call or text 954-947-7377, or you can tweet at VGADumb, or leave a message at facebook.com/VGADumb. VGADumb, of course, stands for Video Games Are Dumb. And then I'll read it out loud. Let's say you didn't get all that information. Do not worry. It is in the description of this podcast and this YouTube video. So just click on the description, see some more, and to find all the links right there. We have a lot to get to this week. We have more Assassin's Creed news. We're going to be talking about all the events that happened 10 years ago and beyond in strong history. We're going to be talking about Destiny in just a moment. There's a lot. This is a big episode, but that means we need to start off by getting on the train. Chug 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 chug. Here comes the train. Toot toot toot. Boop, boop. That's right, it's time for the Hype Train. Feel the PR vibrations as we barrel towards Video Game Satisfaction Station on the Hype Train. This is the part of the show we talk about all those upcoming video games and events to get you hyped up to spend all your money and become a video game guru. Starting off with Destiny news, because last week Activision and Bungie held their highly anticipated Destiny 2 event. During the presentation, the first gameplay footage was shown off. Super cool. It featured the opening sequence where Destiny 1's hub world was destroyed by the invading Red Legion. Who are the Red Legion? Where they're these guys that lived on some other planet, but then their planet blew up because the Traveler, who's like this protective spirit, did not protect their planet, but protected Earth instead. So to get revenge, they're going to take over Earth so that they can have the Traveler's protection. You know, it's a bunch of like lore stuff. The important thing is a lot of things exploded. It looked okay. It looked pretty good. However, most of the conference was not centered around gameplay reveals, but instead the brand new online systems. Unlike the very first Destiny, Destiny 2 is going to have a variation of matchmaking where solo players or groups of players can temporarily join clans for individual sessions. So let's say you're like you're just a solo player, you're just bouncing around, and you're like, oh man, I really want to check out a raid, but I don't have any friends to play with. They don't have Destiny. Well, you can put yourself in this matchmaking situation called guided games, where they will connect you to a friendly clan, and you'll work together and have a lot of fun. Maybe you'll even join the clan. Who knows? Who knows? It was also confirmed that the player versus player mode Crucible will return with a brand new collect and retrieve mode called Countdown. Sort of like a capture the flag, I presume. Raids are also going to be back, obviously, because raids were huge in the first game, but much like the Crucible, no gameplay footage was shown. They didn't show us any gameplay. Damn it. Show us some gameplay. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, they show us the single player, but whatever. Activision once again confirmed the September 8th release date for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One version. However, the previously announced PC version does not have a release date. They don't have a release date for it, but Bungie has promised 4K support, as well as an uncapped frame rate, which should make PC users happy. However, in a somewhat surprising turn, the PC version will be exclusively sold through Blizzard's Battle.net, the same storefront that also helps run, World of Warcraft? StarCraft? Warcraft? Overwatch? Diablo 3, it runs everything that Blizzard does on PC. However, and I keep saying however, but this is true, there's a lot of howevers here. David Shaw, he is the Destiny 2 PC lead, has confirmed this PC version will not have dedicated servers. For real. We'll come back to that in just a moment. I watched the entire event last week, and as a casual, and I mean real casual, like I played a bit of it, Destiny fan, I walked away pretty impressed. I mean, the gameplay demo was vibrant, it was chaotic, the environments looked like they were lived in, they actually looked like they were parts of a town or something as opposed to just weird warehouses and natural environments. This looked like a real place, which was kind of cool. And the mission itself was super dynamic, there were lots of explosions, ships were flying around everywhere, there were scripted moments, and there were rainstorms, and at one point you jumped on top of a spaceship and you went inside and were killing more of these Red Legion guys. It looked like, you know, I would say almost like Halo, whereas the original Destiny just kind of looked like, you know, you walked into a room, you shot a bunch of stuff, and then like somebody was like, I'm downloading the data, you have to hold them off, and then you held them off, and then you left, which was boring. This looked like there was a real adventure to it. Not to mention the whole guided game system sounds incredible. That's been a problem for MMOs for decades, and it sounds like they've actually solved it, which is super cool. But I'm still a little skeptical about Destiny 2, and here's why. It's not the news that they had inside the presentation, it's all the news they had outside the presentation. First of all, launching on PC without dedicated servers is a major no-no. I mean, there was a time when games like Modern Warfare 2 back in 2009 could get away with it, but in 2017, you've got, you know, a lot more competition, especially on PC. There are just small independent developers that can just drop a first-person shooter that just takes over everything. I mean, look at Stardew Valley. It's just like a Harvest Moon type game. Just dominated PC for months. Now you've got that brand new third-person shooter that everybody's playing. I can't remember the name of it, but it's kind of like SOCOM. And that's just taking over PC. I mean, Destiny, if they're going to arrive, if they're going to be this big AAA experience, they need to offer that, you know, AAA experience. And dedicated servers is certainly a part of that. So hopefully they reconsider, because people already online are not happy. But there's this other tidbit, and I want to stress this. This is a rumor, but I heard this and it's like, oh, this can't be right. This cannot be right. There were some people at the event that were reporting the console version is going to be running at 30 frames per second. And even at one point, one of the project leads was talking about the PlayStation 4 Pro, you know, the newest version of the PlayStation 4. And he was saying that, oh, 4K mode will not hit 60. Okay. Now, I'm not a frame rate snob. Like, there are some games that I actually think look better at 30 frames per second. And I know that makes some PC users just want to rip their ears out, but it's true. Some games I think look better at 30 frames per second as opposed to 60. But when it comes to first-person shooters, especially in 2017, it's mandatory. It has to be 60 frames per second because you are trying to use this tiny reticle and you're moving it along a screen to take something out. Especially if you're using like a sniper rifle. Like, I don't even know how you would do that. Like 30 frames per second. I cannot think of a single first-person shooter this generation. No, I can't think of any that were 30 frames per second. In fact, I would gladly take a less graphically intense version of the game just to increase the performance. And I know if you don't know much about frame rates, you're like rolling your eyes like, whatever, who cares? You will, I guarantee you. You'll be like, oh, the gameplay's not as smooth as Overwatch or Call of Duty. It just doesn't have that same feel. And that's because frame rate really matters when it comes to first-person shooters. But I want to hear from you guys. Let me know what you thought about Destiny. You know, beyond the rumors that we were just talking about. You know, let me know what you thought about the whole reveal, what you thought about the gameplay demo. Were you a fan of the very first Destiny? Or is this going to be like the first one you might give a chance to? Let me know. PRESSURECAST@gmail.com, 954-947-7377, or tweet at VGADumb. All those links are available in the description below. Toot toot. It sure sounds like there's going to be a new Assassin's Creed out before the end of the year. Earlier this month, a supposed screenshot of the next game was leaked, with the source claiming it will be released under the title Assassin's Creed Origin and released this fall. Now, Ubisoft has confirmed an entry will come out sometime this fiscal year. Fiscal year? What's a fiscal year? Well, it means it'll be out before March 31st, 2018. During an investor call, the chief financial officer, Alan Martinez, hinted the game would heavily feature an online component. He said it would be like a live component, which I assume means always online. Hopefully not, but you never know. Shortly following the meeting, the official Assassin's Creed UK Twitter account shared an image with the series logo with the title, "A New Era Begins." Cool. Though Ubisoft has yet to release any information on the game, a number of leaks have stated it will take place in ancient Egypt. I think it's pretty safe to say all of the rumors are right. All of the whole ancient Egypt, the leaked screenshots, because this is an Ubisoft game and they always leak in advance and the rumors are always true. The leaks are always accurate. The one thing they don't always get right is the name of the game. Like originally it was supposed to be Assassin's Creed Empire and now they're changing it over to something else. But yeah, I think it's an open secret. We're going to be seeing Assassin's Creed at this year's E3. And just so you know, Ubisoft is holding their conference at E3 on the afternoon of June 12th. That's going to be a Monday, and we'll cover that during E3 week. But the most interesting tidbit in all of this isn't what we were told by Yves Guillemot and Ellen Martinez, but what we weren't told. How can that be? Well, hear me out. The CEO, Yves Guillemot of Ubisoft, was asked if the series was going back to being annual. You know, you would release a game every single year, just like Assassin's Creed has done for like 8 years. And he straight up refused to answer. He would not answer it, which is fascinating because if there's another game coming out in 2018, he would know. They would already be well into pre-production. But he didn't want to answer it. So either they're not returning to an annual release schedule, which I think would be fine. I think if most people could agree that there's just too much Assassin's Creed out there. Like I have not beaten or even played every Assassin's Creed game. I mean, there was Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, Revelations 3, Black Flag, which is part 4, Unity. There's just too many of these goddamn games, and they're all really long. You know, if they were releasing a game every year that was 8 hours long, I'd be like, all right, cool, yeah, I'll play more Assassin's Creed. But they're all like 40-hour, you know, campaigns. We have to collect the feathers or the books or whatever the fuck it is in this game. And, you know, as neat of a concept as it is, I just can't handle that much game every single year. But, you know, so either they're not doing that, which would be cool, take their time and all that business, or they are, but, you know, they don't want to announce that yet, because they think there's a negative perception to that. And for good reason! People got tired of Assassin's Creed. So hey, Ubisoft, take your time, put out a game every 2 years, take advantage of the new technology, change up the gameplay formula. I'd be down for that. As for Assassin's Creed in Ancient Egypt, I'm totally, yeah, that sounds amazing. Sounds awesome. Cool. Anyway, toot toot. In more Ubisoft news, the company has announced 2 new sequels. This was during the exact same investor call. Far Cry 5 has been confirmed to be in development and will launch sometime before March 31st, 2018. Once again, wait for E3. We'll probably hear more about that. There are rumors that Far Cry 5 is going to be some sort of Western, like Red Dead Redemption or something like that, though. I'd be down for it, but I'm skeptical of how true that is. I mean, if anybody were to do it, it would be Ubisoft. They love to play with their franchises. I mean, for fuck's sake, the last Far Cry was, you know, in prehistoric times. So anything is possible. Likewise, a follow-up to 2014's The Crew will arrive in the same timetable. Neither announcements included gameplay or details or anything like that. This was just an investor call, and they just mentioned it, and then the Ubisoft account tweeted out logos. Okay, I think Far Cry 5 was obvious. I mean, the last 2 games were awesome, or the last 3 games were awesome, and they sold pretty well. Makes sense. Makes sense. But they're making another Crew? I mean, I get it. It sold 10 million copies, but did anyone actually enjoy The Crew? I mean, I assume somebody enjoyed The Crew, but how many? What is the percentage of engagement of people that really dug deep into The Crew? And in case you're like, what is The Crew? You don't remember? Well, this was back in 2014. It was an open world racing game that was basically a shrunk down version of the United States, and you drove around with your crew and you competed in random events and races. I know it sounds cool, but I played it. I hated it. The reviews were at best mixed. So now 3 years later, they're coming back with another The Crew, and I hope they took that time to really narrow in on those mechanics, because I remember just the only way to describe it when I was playing The Crew is that it felt like I was driving a souped up shopping cart. Like it had all the speed, it had all the it was just a souped up shopping cart. Everything was perfect except for the controls. It controlled like a box. It was awful. Just very bad. No thank you. Toot toot. And lastly for Ubisoft, the upcoming South Park Fractured But Whole once again has a release date. The RPG based on the long-running animated show, was originally set to be released in late 2016 before facing a bunch of delays. There were delays after delays after delays. Now Ubisoft has confirmed it will arrive on the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC on October 17th. I'll see it when I believe it. Like, it's been delayed no less than 4 times in less than a year. In case you don't know, South Park the show has a fairly odd production schedule. Matt and Trey Parker, they write the show, they voice the show, they help animate the show in some regards, and they do all of this in less than a week, which is why like every episode of South Park is so topical. They're immediately commenting on the most recent news. That's what they do. They crank out episodes like that. So when it comes to video game development, you know, Matt Parker and Trey Stone are given unlimited freedom and time. Of course there's going to be delays. They don't know how to work in that. You know, they make something in less than a week and then having to spend 18 months on something, and that means they're taking jokes and throwing them out and replacing them with our jokes and changing the plot left and right, because that's just how they work. But if the last game, Stick of Truth, is any indication, it'll be worth the wait. In case you didn't play Stick of Truth, it was just a kind of classic RPG with the South Park characters. Super funny, super fun. I think it's the best thing Matt Parker and Trey Stone had done in like a decade, because I'm not the biggest like South Park fan as of late. They're just kind of, I don't know. I'm not even going to get into that. but I'm really looking forward to this game, especially because Obsidian is working on it. And they made Fallout New Vegas, so you know that they're pretty damn good at what they do. Toot toot. Moving over to Sega, last week the company announced its business roadmap called Road to 2020. Yes, really, how exciting was that? While the presentation was mostly focused on their current properties, at one point Sega announced a, quote, revival of major IPs, end quote. No specific titles were announced. And that's really the whole story right there. But if you're old enough to remember Sega's glory days, this is some exciting news. And I actually went through the list of Sega franchises that have been dormant for some time to see what they could realistically revive in 2017 or 2020. And I don't just mean games I like. I don't just mean series that I enjoy. I mean games that I really look at and go, yeah, that can make a comeback in 2017. And Sonic the Hedgehog is not on the list. So here are my 5 Sega franchises. We're doing a countdown. Here are my 5 Sega franchises I'd like to see come back. Number 5 is something called Virtua Cop, which was an arcade game. It was a light gun game, and it featured 3D graphics, which were super revolutionary at the time. You were moving in a 3D space. Now, it was an on-the-rails shooter because it was a light gun game, but it was very, very impressive for the time. I'd like to see them take that concept and put it into virtual reality. You know, PlayStation VR, Oculus, all that kind of stuff. But instead of like, updating it to the point where like you're walking around freely, no, keep it on the rails. And most importantly, keep the visuals just like they were back in the 90s. Keep these weird blocky characters, because for decades, that's what people thought of when they thought of virtual reality. They thought of these blocky worlds. How cool would it be to have like this retro aesthetic of 3D graphics while you're in VR? On top of that, it would probably make it a lot easier to maintain a very steady frame rate. Maybe it's just me, but I think that would be awesome. Now, number 4 is a game called Full Auto, and this is probably the forgotten Sega franchise. Most people don't remember it at all, but Full Auto was this crazy racing game where you had these cars that had machine guns and missiles, and you'd be driving around, you'd be blowing each other up. And it was also one of the very first games that included the ability to reverse time. It was one of the very first racing games to include that, so you'd crash into something much like in Forza, you'd hold down a button and you could reverse time. It was super cool. And the reason I think they could bring this back is because right now, you look at what's going on over at the Nintendo Switch. They have a game called Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and it's selling like crazy because people like that concept of racing, but also shooting bullets and missiles and things like that. And it's just insane to me that there's nothing like that on the Xbox One or PlayStation or PC. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that Mario Kart is popular because they've had, 8 Mario Karts at this point, so people are already familiar with the franchise. But if they just, if they went after that kind of Rocket League crowd, like something like Rocket League, where it's just these really cartoonish explosions, very vibrant world, really over the top everything, and release it just digitally at first, maybe drop it for $20, I think it could be a huge hit. Just an idea. Hell, maybe even call up the guys that make Rocket League and be like, want to make another Full Auto? Just a thought. Number 3 is something called Skies of Arcadia. And if you've read Sega's financial reports as of late, you'll know that they're extremely happy with the success of a old school JRPG called Persona 5. And it turns out that people still really like JRPGs on their home consoles. They don't need to be portable. They can just be these giant experiences on their console. They're sitting on their couch. They're reading tons of text. They're grinding, leveling up their characters. So why not do that again, except with Skies of Arcadia? This is something that could totally capitalize on the success of Persona 5. It's this awesome pirate adventure where you are a band of heroes who are also pirates. Let's be honest, you're also pirates, and you fly around in these wooden ships. And I mean, you fly around. Like, these wooden ships can just go up into the air. They're like airships, but it's not like magic or anything. It's like they're old school wooden ships. They fly around all across the blue skies. It's super charming. It's really beautiful. And so far, there's only been one game ever that bore the name Skies of Arcadia. It was on the Dreamcast, and there was a re-release on the GameCube, and that's it. Sega needs to fix that. Okay, up next, number 2 is Rent a Hero. Now, this is easily the most obscure game here. Most people have never heard of Rent a Hero, probably because the series has never been released in North America. But listen to this premise. There's a dude who tries to order pizza, but accidentally receives a giant robot suit instead. So now he does the obvious thing. He's running around Japan doing petty superhero work for cash, because he's like Iron Man, but he's got bills to pay. Now imagine if you took that superhero premise and you wrapped it around a Yakuza-style game, you know, open world with tons of mini-games, Rent a Hero. I think that'd be a huge hit, especially because superheroes are huge nowadays, but having that sort of relatable, you know, schlubby dude, I think it would work. Maybe it's just me. And number 1, here it is. Here's the franchise Sega needs to revive. I'm sure you're already mad at me because I didn't mention your favorite, and you're really not gonna like me now, but number 1, the best franchise they should revive is Jet Set Radio. Look, hear me out. I love Jet Set Radio. And this is why you're going to be mad, is because I'm not picking this as number 1 to just remake Jet Set Radio, to remake a Jet Set Radio that we like. In case you never played it, there's a game where you are rolling around town on rollerblades, spraying graffiti, and running from the cops. It's very, very simple, and it's open world too. It's awesome. It works. It's great. It's got sunshine hip-hop. It's just got a really cool vibe. But the reason why you won't like this idea is because I think they need to age down the characters. Make them kids. Appeal to a younger crowd. Like, put them in like 8th grade, 7th grade, something like that. That would appeal to kids. And hell, they could absolutely make, you know, an animated series off of that. You know, go after children. Children like Sega stuff. And I would just like to see Jet Set Radio survive in some fashion. So those are my 5 games that I think Sega needs to revive. Or at least the ones that I think would be successful when they are revived. I'd love to see Panzer Dragoon Saga. I'd love to see Phantasy Star. I'd love to see Crazy Taxi. You know, there's a bunch of games I'd like to see, but in all likelihood, they won't work. Because Sega is trying to make realistic plans right now. And I just think that these would work better. So let me know what Sega games you would like to come back. Description. The links are in the description below. Anyway, toot toot. In more Sega news, this fall's Sonic Forces will feature both 2D and 3D Sonic the Hedgehog action. I know, surprising, huh? However, this entry will include a brand new character creation mode where players will be able to design, dress, and customize their very own animal pals. That's really the whole story. And before we go any further, I do want to mention I hate Sonic the Hedgehog. They have not made a good Sonic the Hedgehog game in at least 20 years. But I will give Sega credit here. The idea of character creation in a Sonic the Hedgehog game is an incredibly smart idea. One of the best ideas they've had for the franchise in a very long time. I mean, go to DeviantArt and look up Sonic the Hedgehog characters. So many Sonic fans create their very own persona, and and they like to make those characters. They like to make the animal characters that would hang out with Sonic. They like to write fan fiction about their characters. That's what Sonic fans like to do. So instead of rolling out another crappy Sonic sidekick from Sega, they're gonna let the fans do it. And, you know, even though I have no interest in creating my own Sonic character, I think the fans will really appreciate that. So good on Sega. I'm just really skeptical about this Sonic Forces game. Anyway, toot toot. Moving over to Xbox news, the long in development re-release of Phantom Dust was finally unleashed on the Xbox One and Windows 10 earlier this week. In a surprise announcement, Microsoft's Aaron Greenberg revealed that the game would launch the following day to all users, and it would be free. It would be a free game. So obviously this is good news for Xbox One owners and Windows 10 users, and I absolutely applaud Microsoft for this goodwill gesture. But if I can just say something, hear me out here, hear me out. Releasing Phantom Dust for free right now was a huge mistake. Hear me out, hear me out. Unless this game is completely broken, which from all accounts it isn't, apparently it runs fine, I would have held this off until E3. I mean, imagine, you're watching that Xbox One conference, and it's getting you all excited for Xbox. You're like, yeah, all this cool Xbox stuff. I'm super pumped. And then Phil Spencer's like, oh, by the way, here's a free game for you right now, today. How cool would that be? Instead of just throwing it out in the middle of May, I know after E3, no one's going to remember this. No one's going to remember Phantom Dust. I would have put it on a bigger stage because more people are aware of what's going on at E3. So unless they're giving away more free games, I think this was a mistake by Microsoft. Just saying. It's a PR thing. It's not about, I downloaded it, I'm excited to play it, but this is about PR, and I don't think they did a very good job. Okay. Microsoft, you should call me if you want some advice. Toot. Moving over to Nintendo, following the Splatoon 2 test fire last month, Nintendo has announced their upcoming fighting game ARMS will receive a series of free demos in the next few weeks. The catch is, they will only occur at very specific times and for short periods of time. Between May 26th to the 28th and June 2nd to the 4th, players will be allowed to try out ARMS before its June 16th release. Though Nintendo has released the dates and times, it is not confirmed the length of each event. If it's anything like Splatoon, it'll probably only be an hour long. I have played these Nintendo test fires before, and I do understand that they are inconvenient. I mean, for some people, it's like, oh, I have to wake up at 5 a.m. or I have to be home at 11 a.m. on a weekday to play this fucking game. That's absurd. I get that. But I do think these are smart tests. I mean, after all, Nintendo needs to challenge their servers. They need to know that they can handle a huge influx of players all at once. That's why they designed it like this. Me personally, though, I'm really curious to see how ARMS turns out. I did watch part of the Nintendo Direct this week, and I'm still really skeptical. It's like this game where you're using stretchy arms to punch each other. It's like a third-person fighting game. I don't know how good this could be. I don't know how long-lasting this game could be. It just looks way too simple. But I will absolutely check out these demos, and I will let you know what I think on the PRESSURECAST. Okay? Toot. Alright, so we have a ton of Nintendo Switch games that were announced this week, and we're just going to run through them all really quick. First of all, Natsume has revealed Harvest Moon Light of Hope, the latest in the long-running RPG farming series, will apparently be going back to its roots, resembling the SNES. They didn't show us any footage, they didn't have any screenshots, and there's no release date, but Light of Hope will launch on the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and PC sometime this year. Best of luck to them. I hope that Natsume nails it. I hope it knocks it out of the park. I love me some Harvest Moon. But I'm just a little bit worried because, hey, we were talking about earlier, Stardew Valley kind of stole that audience. I don't know if anyone wants to go back to Harvest Moon, which makes me sad. It really does. Really depressed. Anyway, the 3DS series Berserker Striker Gunvolt is making its home console debut on the 3DS. It's making its home console debut on the Switch. It was a 3DS series, now it's coming to the Switch. The Berserker Striker Gunvolt Striker Pack will include both games, Berserker Striker Gunvolt 1 and 2. However, it will now perform at 60 frames per second. The bundle is going to be hitting the eShop on August 31st, though it might also get a physical release. That just hasn't been confirmed. I've actually played the first Berserker Gun Striker, and I love these games. They're sort of like Mega Man, but instead of like just shooting people with bullets, you're attaching these sort of like conductors. So the bullets don't hurt anybody. They're like pew pew pew, you shot somebody 5 times, and then you would hold the shoulder button and the dude would just unleash lightning, and the lightning would attack whoever had the bullets attached to them. It was a really cool concept, and if you've never played it before, if you don't have a Nintendo Switch, I would recommend it on the 3DS. But I'm really looking forward to see how this looks in 6 frames per second. Sounds cool. Also, during a Japan-exclusive Nintendo Direct, it was announced that last year's popular retro platformer Owlboy is coming to the eShop. This marks the first time Owlboy will be available on a home console. To be honest, I have not played Owlboy. It looks fantastic, and the reviews were incredibly positive. But I'll say, the pixel art, it looks like it'll be right at home on a Nintendo console. And finally, 2016's Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 is coming to the Nintendo Switch. Players will be able to engage in local multiplayer battles through Switch's wireless play. If you want to know how I felt about Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, you can check out my review at youtube.com/videogamesardumb. Here's a spoiler. I didn't fucking like it. It's a bad game. Toot toot. And lastly on the hype train, developer Don't Nod has officially announced its follow-up to the 2015 episodic game Life is Strange. No details were shared, and a release date has not been revealed. But in a blog post, Don't Nod stated, quote, "We can't wait to tell you all about it when the time is right, but for now we are hard at work ensuring it is the very best game we can create," end quote. Good for Don't Nod. They've actually had a real struggle as a development house. In case you don't know, they made a game called Remember Me, which was being funded by Sony until Sony dropped it, and then Capcom picked it up, but it didn't matter because the game was a total bomb, and then they had to make something smaller. You know, Life is Strange was like an episodic adventure game, and the fan base just ate it up, and it sold over 3 million copies! So good for Don't Nod. I'm really excited to see how Part 2 shakes out. Toot toot. Alright, let's find out what's going to be coming out this week, digitally and in retail. On Tuesday, Summon Night 6 Lost Borders will be on the PlayStation 4 and Vita. Migraine Arcane Warfare will be out on the PC. Disgaea 5 Complete will be on the Nintendo Switch. If you're looking for like a lengthy RPG on the Switch, Disgaea 5 is going to have you covered. Those games are huge, hundreds of hours long. Impact Rider will be out on the PC. Samurai Warrior Spirit of Sanada. It's like Canada, but with sand. Either way, it'll be on the PlayStation 4 and PC. Portal Knights will be on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Pax Nora will be on the PlayStation 4. Utawaro... No, oh my god, I hate this. No Mask of Deception will be on the PlayStation 4 and Vita. I probably mispronounced that. I don't care. Steel Division Normandy 44 will be out on the PC. And then on Thursday, yes, we're not even done with this list yet. On Thursday, Vanquish will be out on the PC. Medusa's Labyrinth will be on the PC. Then on Friday, Friday the 13th, The Game will be on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. I'm really looking forward to seeing the reviews on that one. Guilty Gear Xrd Revelator 2 will be on the PlayStation 4 and possibly the PS3. I saw 2 separate listings. If it's a PS3 game, that's kind of remarkable in 2017. The console's over 10 years old. Rhyme will be out on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. And Get Even will be on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. And lastly, Ultra Street Fighter 2: The Final Challengers will be out on the Nintendo Switch. Beep, beep. That's gonna do it for the Hype Train. Thank you, Hype Train. What a fun segment. Anyway, it's getting muggy in here. I need to step outside. I know a place that's always warm with the glow of cold hard cash. That's right, it's time for... The Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. Yes, the Chart Park. This is the part of the show where we talk about legal business and financial news in the video game industry, and we find out which fat cats of Wall Street are going to tip their hats towards Lady Luck. I have some good news. The NPD has released the best-selling consoles and games in North America for the month of April. Now, we'll get to the best-selling games at the end of the Chart Park because that's what we do here on the Chart Park, baby. But for the second month in a row, the Nintendo Switch takes the top spot with over 280,000 units sold in North America in April alone. In combination with the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, last month's sales resulted in the highest console hardware revenue in April since 2011. There's a lot of qualifiers there, but it is the highest console revenue for the month of April since 2011, 6 years ago. Makes sense? Probably not. Doesn't matter. With the entire market reaching $636 million, that's up 10% from April 2016. Hardware jumped to $195 million, an increase of 37%. Games saw a slight improvement overall with 6%, totaling $304 million. So games just did a little better. They did a little better. With accessories seeing similar results with a 4% increase, resulting in $126 million in revenue. So the Nintendo Switch, it took the top spot for the second month in a row. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Switch, all right? We're off to a bad start. You can already tell. But I'm not trying to take anything away from the Nintendo Switch. But once again, I see a lot of people taking away the wrong lessons here. They're looking at this and they're taking away the wrong lessons. Like, of course it's going to be the best-selling console. We're 3.5 years into the generation, which means that there are less new systems for the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 being sold. People already know what they want. I mean, I'm not saying that the people are no longer buying those systems, but not in such a fervor. If the Nintendo Switch didn't win the month of April, that would be actually really alarming for Nintendo. Really, really alarming. And in fact, I think the Nintendo Switch is going to do, really awesome all through the summer. June, July, you guys know summer. But then, maybe in September or October, we'll see what happens. But I see other people citing the fact that this is the highest hardware revenue since April 2011 as a sign of how good the Switch is doing. And it is doing well. It really is. But of course it is. See, consoles don't come out in March. So yeah, numbers are going to be up. Oh, and by the way, why was revenue so high for the month of April 2011? Oh, that's right, because the 3DS launched on March 27th. Just saying. By the way, in case you don't know, maybe people thought of the 3DS launch as a disappointment. So just temper those expectations. But yes, the Nintendo Switch is doing great. It's doing a lot better than even I expected. But the thing to focus on right now, the thing to focus on right now isn't the statistics. It isn't the records being broken. It's on the units being sold. Make sense? Maybe it doesn't. Anyway, let's go on to the next story. Earlier this year, ZeniMax shook up the VR world when it was awarded $500 million in its lawsuit with Oculus VR. ZeniMax accused Oculus employee John Carmack of stealing code and utilizing it in Oculus technology. Now ZeniMax has its sights set on Samsung over their Gear VR headsets. So in case this is news to you, Oculus got sued by ZeniMax because they're like, hey, you stole our code. And Oculus was like, no, we didn't. And then the judge was like, yes, you did, $500 million. Seriously. But ZeniMax is alleging that the copywritten code is also in the Gear VR headset, which are manufactured by Samsung. Quote, Samsung continued to develop the Gear VR with full knowledge of ZeniMax's allegations and without obtaining any right or permission from ZeniMax to use it or any of its copyrights or other confidential information, end quote. Earlier this year, Samsung announced over 6.3 million Gear VRs had been shipped globally, bringing in over $1.8 billion in revenue in 2016 alone. So this is pretty serious news for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I own a Gear VR. I'm actually looking at it. I picked it up last night and just was looking at it because right on the side of it, it just says, powered by Oculus. Just right on there, right on the device itself. And so far, we have a $500 million lawsuit that says Oculus stole technology from ZeniMax. So we're off to a bad start. Second, the Oculus headset and development kits aren't exactly lighting the world on fire, but their mobile division has been steadily growing with things like the Gear VR. In fact, it's grown so much they actually established a separate division just for mobile. So they had the ones that were going to be for the PC, and then they actually created a brand new division for mobile. That's how successful it was. So ZeniMax is already taking away hundreds of $millions of from Oculus, and now they're going after their most popular headset. That's really bad news for Facebook. That's basically the whole story, but we will be following this closely in the weeks and months to come. Moving on, it's official. E3 has sold out. Now, when we talk about your favorite band, if I were to say they sold out, you'd be like, ugh, that's bad news. But when E3 sells out, that's good news because this is the very first ever public E3. Last February, 15,000 tickets were put on sale for $250 each. Now, according to the ESA's website, there are no more tickets available. The year's most newsworthy trade show will kick off on June 12th? 13th? Well, June 13th is the first day that the public can arrive. I'm looking forward to it. I gotta say, this is the end of the era. This is the end of an era. Don't get me wrong, I totally understand why the ESA opened up E3 for everyone. I mean, there are other shows out there like PAX, and they attract a huge crowd. They're sort of overshadowing E3 in many ways, in terms of enthusiasm. So this was bound to happen. But man, I just don't like that E3 is going public, because back in the day, E3 was a mythical event. Journalists would go there, and then like months down the line, all the news would be reported in magazines. Like it would happen in May, because this used to happen in May, and it eventually moved over to June. And like it would occur, and then months down the line, we would get news about E3. I mean, the internet was around even during the first E3, and sometimes it broke news, but like getting the real gritty details, that took time. And then some videos of the press conferences started to come out. I mean, I'm sure we all remember when they announced Twilight Princess on the GameCube originally. People were freaking out. There's a really famous video of that. And then eventually websites, started broadcasting the event. G4 started airing the event on TV. But it always maintained a distance from the general consumer. I mean, you could totally scam your way into E3. You could con yourself into a ticket by being like, I work at GameStop. I'm part of the industry. Let me in. And you could get a ticket that way. But now it's just like anybody. You got $250? Cool. You can go to E3. I just hope it maintains the concept of like a premium event. I just don't want to see cosplayers at E3. I know they've been there in the past, but usually they were hired by the publishers. Whatever, let's move away from this. Anyway, here in the chart park, we love two things. We love money and we love charts. And boy, oh boy, do we have a beautiful combination of the two. Analyst site Newzoo has released its 2014 video game revenue list, listing the top 100 countries in terms of video game revenue. So for the first time ever in the chart park, here are the top 10 countries that spend the most money on video games. Number 10 is Italy with 1.8 billion. Number 9 is Spain with 1.9 billion. Number 8 is Canada with 1.94 billion. Number 7 is France with 2.9 billion. Number 6 is South Korea with 4.1 billion. Number 5 is the United Kingdom with 4.2 billion. Here's where it gets interesting. Number 4 is Germany with 4.3 billion. Number 3 is Japan with 12.5 billion. Number 2 is the United States with 25 billion. And number 1 is China with 27 billion. So what can we learn from this list? Well, not much in general, because if you look at it, for the most part, the bigger the population, the more money they spend on video games. It's not very interesting or exciting. For instance, the UK has about 65 million citizens, and then Germany has 81 million citizens, and then Japan has 127 million citizens. 5, 4, 3. It lines up pretty perfectly. Though, I do want to point out, this proves how much Japan loves video games. They're only a third larger than Germany, but they spend 3 times as much on video games. They're like around, maybe a third of the size of the United States, but they spend half as much as the United States. That's insane. Japan really does love video games. And yes, before you say anything about, pachinko or whatever, this does exclude gambling. Pretty remarkable. Way to go, Japan. Moving on, The Witcher is coming to Netflix. Last week, Platug, they're a Polish production company. They announced plans to adapt the popular video game and book series into a live-action TV show. While the show is early into production, The Witcher creator Andrzej Sapkowski has already been hired on as a creative consultant. Whatever, I apologize, I don't know how to speak Polish. I know this news isn't directly related to video games, but it kind of is. I mean, The Witcher was always a popular book series over in Poland, but I almost said Boland. But the video games are what made The Witcher into an international hit. And while I'm not like a huge fan of The Witcher, I didn't really like The Witcher 3. I just didn't. I thought it was neat. I just didn't. I can at least agree that this is going to make a fascinating TV show if they do everything right, because even the side missions of Witcher 3 could make entire episodes of a TV show. They're really that good. I hope it turns out okay. And let's move on. Last week on the Hype Train, we were discussing the new collaboration between Guitar Man and Prep of the Rapper creators. It's called Project Rap Rabbit. Since then, developer Nana Anshan has officially launched a Kickstarter page for Project Rap Rabbit, though it was not without controversy. According to the stretch goals, the production needed $1.1 million to release on the PC and PlayStation 4. That was their first goal. Then they had additional goals, such as $3.1 million for the Xbox One version, and then $4.95 million for the Nintendo Switch. Upset Nintendo fans quickly voiced their displeasure at this, causing Nana Anshan to alter the requirements for the Nintendo Switch version. Quote, "Our original Nintendo Switch target was the cumulative total of development of all features across all platforms, with the additional cost of porting on top. Restructuring all of our targets enable us to recalculate the porting costs of internal resources needed to bring Project Rabbit to the Switch, which is now $1.5 million. Went down from $4.95 to $1.5 million. Regardless, the crowdsourcing project is already off to a bad start, bringing in only $144,000 of its $1.1 million goal. Project Rabbit Kickstarter is set to end on June 19th, 2017. I gotta say, I feel bad for these guys. Not over the Nintendo Switch deal, because that was their fault. That was stupid. $4.95 million for a Nintendo Switch version of a rhythm rapping game. That's absurd. But I'm really, I'm sad because they're just too late. Like, Kickstarter is just not that, it's not a thing much anymore. I mean, of course it is. Of course games still go through Kickstarter, but that moment of, nostalgia pieces going to Kickstarter, that's kind of it. If this was 2 or 3 years ago, I think Project Rabbit would have reached $4.95 million, no problem. Seriously, I really think it would have been a success. But in 2017, after a lot of these Kickstarter games have failed to deliver the quality that many have expected, things like Mighty Number 9, to some people, Broken Age, the Double Fine one, they didn't quite like that as much as they'd hoped. Kickstarter is not always a success now, and people are aware of it. And when you have bad PR about how much you're trying to get people to pay, that especially doesn't help. Anyway, moving back to Ubisoft news, last week the company released its annual earnings report, and the results are pretty positive. Over the past fiscal year, Ubisoft sales totaled $1.63 billion, with an increase of 4.7% over the last year. Annual operating income reached $265 million, jumping 40.7%. That's a brand new company record. For the first time in Ubisoft history, over 50% of sales revenue came from digital sources, bringing in $817 million, which is bonkers. Much of this is from DLC and season passes, which accounted for 21% of sales, as well as a monthly active user base, which rose 26.7%. So people are sticking with the Ubisoft games, probably because of The Division. Ubisoft is already off to a strong start in 2017, with their recently released Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands being the best-selling game of 2017 so far. Ubisoft announced that altogether, the Tom Clancy franchise currently has 44 million unique registered players, which is really impressive. I gotta say, it's really nice to see some Ubisoft news. In case you don't know, there's a giant conglomerate called Vivendi, which has been trying to aggressively buy all of Ubisoft's stock and take it over. Like, they've been doing this for the past 18 months. And seeing some positive news about Ubisoft just doing well, it's nice. It's refreshing. But it's really hard to tell how Ubisoft's success is going to affect Vivendi's strategy going forward. On one hand, this raises the value of Ubisoft stock, makes it more expensive, makes it more difficult, for Vivendi to buy it all. Even though, of course, its stock, Ubisoft stock dropped by $4 after they released these numbers. But that always happens because people, sell high, buy low, bullshit like that. But on the other hand, it makes them more attractive to Vivendi because, well, Ubisoft's a big success and Vivendi's not hurting for money. So they could just totally buy them anyway. I really hope they don't. We'll see. Anyway, as promised, we're going to the charts. Here are the top 10 best-selling games in North America for the month of April. Number 10 is Call of Duty Black Ops 2. That's not right, it's Black Ops 3. How is Call of Duty Black Ops 3 still in the top 10? Can anyone tell me that? Number 9 was Overwatch, which of course did not include digital sales. Number 8 was NBA 2K17. Number 7 was Mass Effect Andromeda. Number 6 was Grand Theft Auto 5. Number 5 was Ghost Recon Wildlands. Number 4 was MLB The Show 17. Number 3 was The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Number 2 was Persona 5. And number 1 was Mario Kart 8. As I pointed out before, Mario Kart, Persona, Zelda, Overwatch, they did not include digital sales on this NPD list, whereas for the rest of the games, they did include digital sales. I am blown away that Persona 5 took the top spot. I am shocked. This just I didn't expect that. It's a really niche JRPG, but it makes you wonder how this is going to roll out. Will this still be in the top 10 months down the line? Will word of mouth spread and will more people pick up Persona 5? Or because this was a very anticipated JRPG, was this just like a huge pop? Like everyone that wanted Persona 5 bought it in April and then it won't be in the top 10 by May. Maybe. I don't know. But the real success story here is Mario Kart. I mean, they sold 550,000 copies in just a month. I've seen some conservative numbers that say Nintendo makes about $27 from every game. But if that's true, they made $15 million in the month of April just on Mario Kart. That's not bad for a 3-year-old game that just got re-released on a new console. Pretty impressive. All right, let's move over to the cursed land of tea and crumpets to find out where the best-selling games in the UK for last week. Number 10 was The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Number 9 was Horizon Zero Dawn. Number 8 was Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Wildlands. Number 7 was Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Number 6 was Lego Worlds. Number 5 was Rocket League. Number 4 was FIFA 17. Number 3 was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Number 2 was Grand Theft Auto 5. How's Grand Theft Auto 5 still here? It's been 4 years. It's been 4 years. And number 1 in the UK for the week was Prey. If you want to know what I thought about Prey, go to youtube.com/videogamesardumb. I did not like that game. Now let's set sail over to the land of bullet trains known as Japan to find out where the top 10 best-selling games over there for the week. Number 10 was Mario Sports Superstars on the 3DS. Number 9 was Pro Yaku Famatsuya Climax on the 3DS. Number 8 was Dark Souls 3, the Fire Fades edition on the PlayStation 4. Number 7 was Nier Automata, which is a game that's near to my heart. Number 6 was Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia on the 3DS. Number 5 was Attack on Titan Escape from Certain Death on the 3DS. What a great name. Number 4 was Dragon Ball Heroes Ultimate Mission X on the 3DS. Just a lot of 3DS things. Number 3 was The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo Switch. Number 2 was Monster Hunter Double Cross on the 3DS. And number 1 was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Nintendo Switch. They took the top 6 spots. 6 through 1 are just Nintendo games. That is remarkable. I mean, they're third-party games, but they're 3DS and Switch titles. Really impressive. Really impressive. All right, let's go over to Japan's best-selling consoles for the week. So we're going to be talking about what are the best-selling consoles over in Japan for the past week. Starting out with the Nintendo Switch with 24,712, new 3DS with 13,643, PlayStation 4 with 12,334, PlayStation 4 Pro with 4,961, PlayStation Vita with 4,114, 2DS with 2,862, new 3DS with 1,021, PlayStation 3 with 325, Wii U with 157, and in last place is the Xbox One with 149. Last week, it finally broke its 9-week curse and got out of last place. But Xbox One is once again the least selling console in Japan. And so the count begins again. Yes, it does. But that's gonna have to do it for the Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. We've talked about the big money, but now it's time to talk about the smaller things. That's right, it's time to get tiny. It's time for Pocket Talk, Pocket Talk, Pocket Talk. This is the part of the show we talk about the latest mobile and handheld news. And we're going to be starting it off with a Wall Street Journal rumor. According to the Wall Street Journal, Nintendo will launch a mobile title for Zelda this year. Yes, Zelda is coming to your smartphone. According to their sources, it will follow the Animal Crossing game, apparently, which is going to be coming out in the second half of 2017. So maybe early 2018, who knows. They also mentioned that there's a Pokemon card game that is rumored to be in development. If true, this would match Nintendo's president Tatsumi Kimishima's plan of releasing 3 mobile games every single year. I think it's kind of obvious Zelda was going to be appearing on a smartphone at some point. I mean, once you have Mario on a smartphone, there is no sacred cow left. But how exactly are they going to do Zelda on a phone? Like, how are they going to take Zelda and put it on a touch interface? I mean, they could do what they did with the Phantom Hourglass, which, in case you do not remember the Phantom Hourglass, it was a Nintendo DS game that exclusively used the stylus. Every movement was done with the stylus on the DS, on the touchscreen. But that was built for a handheld audience, and Phone audiences are a lot more casual. So I wouldn't expect your usual grand Zelda adventure. But I want to hear from you guys. What kind of Zelda game do you want on your phone? I mean, what is it gonna, is it gonna be like a puzzle game or something like that? Is it gonna be like a, I don't know, you're gonna move Link around with your finger? Is it gonna be an endless runner? Like, done in Zelda 2 style on the NES? Who can say? But that's actually it for Pocket Talk. Pocket Talk, Pocket Talk. Let's take the mushroom. It's Pocket Talk. It's tiny. There's not a lot there. That's how it works. But we are going to move on to the final segment of the Pressure Cast. This is where we take a look back at the week that was 10 years ago and beyond to discuss all of the anniversaries and a little something we like to call Strong History. 10 years ago on the PlayStation 2, Odin Sphere was launched in North America. Talk about a cult classic. This is like an action role-playing game that did not make a commercial splash when it was launched in 2007. But word of mouth and especially, high resale value on old PS2 copies eventually led Vanillaware to re-release the game on the PlayStation 4 last year. True story. 11 years ago on the Xbox 360, Rockstar Games presents Table Tennis. So picture this. The 360 is just launched. You're entering a brand new generation. The biggest franchise in the world is Grand Theft Auto. And you're like, man, what is Rockstar going to do next? What are they going to do next? The last thing you would expect from them, or really any major publisher, developer, is to launch a goddamn table tennis game. But that's exactly what they did, and it turned out to be pretty damn fun. But once it was announced that the engine used in the table tennis game was the same one that was going to be used in Grand Theft Auto, a lot of people began doing really bad photoshops of the table tennis characters in cars and walking around in streets. I'm sure you can look this up. It was ridiculous. But if you've never played it before, I recommend it. It's a really fun table tennis game, especially when you got 2 players. Lots of skill involved, for real. Also 11 years ago, on the PlayStation 2, Jaws Unleashed was launched. This is a horrible game. This is a really bad game. Gameplay is not good. Graphics, also not good. The story is stupid. And yes, this is actually based off of the film Jaws, and yes, you actually play as the shark, but no one in their right mind would recommend this game. It's just bad. Every critic panned it. And yet, it was able to sell over 250,000 copies on the Xbox alone. Yeesh. Also 11 years ago, on the PSP, Monster Hunter Freedom was launched. It might be hard to believe, but there was a time and a place where Monster Hunter was a console franchise. It launched on the PS2, and it did okay. And then they made a sequel on the PS2, and it did okay. But when Monster Hunter jumped over to the PSP, it became a national phenomenon in Japan. It sold over 1 million copies in Japan, which is really, really big. In fact, it became so popular, PSP adoption rates just increased drastically. Except the funny thing about Monster Hunter on the PSP is that it had a very odd camera control with the D-pad, where you move the character with the analog stick on the PSP. There was only one analog stick, so people had to start adapting their hands to control everything all at once, and it resulted in a couple of medical injuries that were known as the claw. Yes, really, look it up. 12 years ago, on the Game Boy Advance, WarioWare Twisted was launched. Now here's a game you just cannot emulate. This is mostly your traditional WarioWare minigame collection, but instead of using buttons and a D-pad, the cartridge included a gyro sensor, forcing players to twist and swing their Game Boy Advance. It's ridiculously fun. If you can find a copy, I highly recommend it. And yes, it will work on either your Game Boy Advance SP or your regular Game Boy Advance, though I really recommend you play it with a Game Boy Advance SP because backlit screens, they're amazing. 13 years ago, on the Game Boy Advance, Mario Vs. Donkey Kong was released. Now I know, after 7 Mario vs. Donkey Kong games, you're like, I don't care about Mario vs. Donkey Kong, it's not that big of a deal. But check this out. Apparently this was a game that was going to be released on the GameCube originally. They were developing this really ambitious project that was going to be called Donkey Kong Plus. On a GameCube, you would design these Mario vs. Donkey Kong stages, and then you would port them over to your Game Boy Advance using the link cable. Instead, eventually, they just ditched the GameCube version altogether and got rid of the create a stage mode, and now we have the Mario vs. Donkey Kong franchise. Isn't that crazy? It was supposed to be a GameCube game. 14 years ago, on the Game Boy Advance, lots of Game Boy Advance games this way. Lots of Game Boy Advance games. 14 years ago, WarioWare incorporated Mega Microgames. So we were just talking about WarioWare, but let's dig into the history of WarioWare. If you're familiar with the game where in WarioWare where you have to kill a fly, it's probably no surprise to you that this game has a close relationship with the Mario Paint franchise, because Mario Paint also had that fly game. But here's what's crazy. The original concept for WarioWare was based directly on the minigames from the 64 DDs, the 64 being an attachment to the Nintendo 64, Mario Artist Polygon Studio. And the team over at R&D1 loved the concept of these minigames so much that they wanted to make a comedy version starring Wario. Originally it was going to be called Made by Wario. And here's where it gets really weird. Apparently production began in secret, with the team only presenting their ideas to their bosses once the concepts were finished. Apparently their managers were incredibly confused by the game. They didn't understand why Wario was picking his nose all the time and things like that, but they saw that the team was very passionate, so WarioWare was greenlit. True story. 16 years ago on the PlayStation 2, Red Faction was launched. And of course, Red Faction would later be released on the PC, but it started on the PlayStation 2. It's probably best known for geomod technology, which allowed players to blow up portions of the environment in real time, instant environmental destruction. It was huge back in the day. People were blown away by this. But here's a fun fact, it wasn't always supposed to be a new IP. See, developer Volition, the same team that works on Saints Row, they were originally developing a sequel to the Descent franchise, which was like this spaceship first-person franchise that was really popular on PC. But eventually, the project was canceled, so they took all their ideas for Descent 4 and instead made Red Faction, which is kind of crazy. 17 years ago on the Nintendo 64, Perfect Dark was launched. The follow-up to GoldenEye. One of the most popular party games of all time. Humongous hit. But imagine this, alright? If you're annoyed by DLC today, imagine that you actually need to go out and buy a physical object. When it came to Perfect Dark, that was the Nintendo 64's expansion pack. If you didn't have the expansion pack, you couldn't play the single player to Perfect Dark. And here's the worst part. Pretty much no other games used it, except for like Donkey Kong 64. Can you imagine that shit? Can you imagine how bad that would be? You go out of your way to go buy a game, and then you find out, nope, no single player. You have to go out and buy a $30 add-on. So don't be mad about DLC today. That is really screwing over people. Over on the PlayStation, Nightmare Creatures 2 was launched. One critic referred to Nightmare Creatures 2 as a game that, quote, fails miserably. Alright, 20 years ago, on the Nintendo 64, War Gods was launched. This was Midway's attempt to capitalize on the 3D fighting game craze, because previous to that, they were just making 2D fighting games. But War Gods is a really lackluster fighter, and it did not help them test out a lot of their concepts, which they would be adding into Mortal Kombat 4. It is just a bad game. It's nowhere near the level of Virtua Fighter or Tekken. But here's the ironic thing. Midway was all eager to get into 3D games. And now look at the team that was over at Midway. Now they're over at NetherRealm Games, and last week they released Injustice 2, which is a 2D fighter. How crazy is that? Anyway, moving over to Star Trek Generations, also released 20 years ago. Star Trek Generations was released on Windows. The German magazine PC player called Star Trek Generations on the PC the biggest disappointment of 1997. I don't even know how that happens. 21 years ago, way back in 1996, Metal Slug was launched on the Neo Geo. This is probably the last great arcade run-and-gun shooter, but much like WarioWare, it started as another game, and even with a different company. Apparently the developers over at IREM were making something called The Hunt, and it started off as this intense-looking tank game. You're in this vehicle and you're just blasting everyone. However, test players just didn't really like it. They were not impressed by this gritty tank shooter. So responding to the feedback, they added soldier characters. Really, the soldiers in Metal Slug were not originally there. But they would actually begin to add new ideas and cut out old ideas. And before they knew it, they had a really comedic, fun shooter. And that is what Metal Slug is now. All because players did not like the tank. Which I will say is insane, because the tank, Metal Slug, is awesome. 22 years ago, back in 1995 on the Genesis, Light Crusader was launched. This is a long-forgotten game by Treasure. They're best known for, intense shooters like Gunstar Heroes and Sin and Punishment, or beat-em-ups like Guardian Heroes. But Light Crusader was a top-down RPG dungeon crawler. Like, imagine a Platinum game if it was top-down. Just not as good. But it's worth a look if you've never played it before. Also, almost said Wario, World Heroes Perfect was launched in arcades. Anyone that's played any of the World Hero games will tell you that it is not perfect. World Heroes is not a great game. This is the follow-up to World Heroes 2 Jet, but apparently it's the best in the series, though not enough to impress Neo Geo to make anymore because World Heroes Perfect is the final entry in the World Heroes series. True story. 25 years ago, King of the Monsters 2, The Next Thing, launched in the arcade. I have nothing to say about this game except that is my favorite title of all time. The Next Thing. 31 years ago, in Japan, on the Famicom, Dragon Quest was launched. This is a huge deal, and the story behind it is unbelievable. You see, back in the day over in Japan, they would hold contests for things that were, you know, actual job hunts. Like if I held a burger flipping contest and then gave the winner, you know, a job at McDonald's. That's basically what this was. So they held a contest in 1982 centered around video game programming. Well, Yuki Horii won a trip to San Francisco. He was the winner, so they sent him over to San Francisco in 1983, and he went to Apple Fest. This was a convention that was centered around the booming Apple computer development industry. Pretty big deal in 1983. Horii was, you know, on the show floor, and the biggest takeaways that he had was this exciting new concept of computer role-playing video games. He saw things like Ultima, he saw things like Wizardry, and he's like, wow, I want to make an RPG. So he goes back to Japan, and he starts designing an RPG. He wants it to be friendly enough for the Japanese crowd, but also simple enough that it can be played on a controller. And he still retained a lot of the ideas of RPGs. He made sure that it was a medieval fantasy title. He tried to keep it relatively open world, even though that wasn't, you know, that was not in all RPGs, but he tried to make it open world. But, you know, it was still missing something, so Enix brought in the Dragon Ball artist Akira Toriyama to create, like, characters for the game. And now, 65 million copies later, Dragon Quest is one of the biggest and longest running and best-selling video game franchises of all time. Pretty big deal. And lastly, in strong history, 37 years ago, over in Japan, Pac-Man was released. Now, I'm sure most people have heard a lot of stories about Pac-Man, so we're not really going to talk about that. I just want to talk about why Pac-Man is important. I want you to think about this for just 1 second. When 37 years ago, 1980, over at Namco, they didn't really care about Pac-Man. They didn't believe in it. I mean, they had just started making video games, and they already had the game that was going to be a hit. It was something called Rally X. It was a top-down racing game that had huge environments and scrolling and all the, you know, the latest technical tricks and whatnot. Whereas Pac-Man was really limited. You just had one single screen, and its concept didn't resemble anything in fiction or the real world. Think about it. Almost all arcade games had some sort of bearing in reality or in science fiction. There were spaceships, there were sports games like Pong, there were racing games like Rally X. Things had to have some sort of connection to reality in one way or another, or at least fantasy. And instead, this game is like a yellow disc that's eating pellets. That's grossly abstract. And yet, the idea of a video game protagonist caught on. Everyone loved Pac-Man. It brought in over $1 billion in its first 18 months in arcades. Now, adjusted for inflation, that's $2.69 billion. And that's not even including the revenue from t-shirts, or breakfast cereals, or pop songs, or TV shows. Not bad for a game that nobody believed in. 37 years ago, Pac-Man. We salute ya. But that's gonna have to do it for Strong History. Fun. That was fun. That was a fun segment. Wow. It is getting muggy in here because it is hot outside. It is hot in here. I got computers. I got lights. I got all this stuff running. I gotta get out of here. But before I do, it is time to close up the show. Remember, go to youtube.com/videogamesardumb if you want to check out my review of Injustice 2, or if you want to check out my review of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, or if you want to check out my review of Prey, or if you want to check out my review of so many other games, go take a peek. Outlast 2, The Silver Case, Yooka-Laylee, Nier Automata, Horizon Zero Dawn. I have so many reviews out there. You should be watching them and liking them and sharing them and subscribing to the YouTube page. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's super easy. You can follow me at Dr. Karate Chop. That's at Dr. Karate Chop. Please do so. Send me a message that just says hello, and I will say hello back to you, sir. Maybe not in those exact words. But yeah, you know, I'll be doing the review of Injustice. I'll try to get a review of Farpoint, the PlayStation VR game. I want to get that up relatively soon as well. But yeah, that's about it. The show is over. Just like the school year is over. So many people are finally getting out of school, they're graduating, and that's just great news because school life sucks. It's time to get out into the real world. But while school ends, how are we going to connect it this week? Yes, school ends. All things end, but the PRESSURECAST does not, because the PRESSURECAST is forever. See you guys.